chapter discussed the source and nature of ethical issues in international businesses, the different philosophical approaches to business ethics, and the steps managers can take to ensure that ethical issues are respected in international business decisions. The term ethics refers to accepted principles of right or wrong that govern the conduct of a person, the members of a profession, or the actions of an organization. Business ethics are accepted principles of right or wrong governing the conduct of business people, and an ethical strategy is one that does not violate these accepted principles. Ethical issues and dilemmas in international business are rooted in the differences among political systems, law, economic development, and culture from nation to nation. The most common ethical issues in international business involve employment practices, human rights, environmental regulations, corruption, and the moral obligation of multinational corporations. The first common issue in ethics of international business are employment practices. The key to employment practices is establishing minimal acceptable standards that safeguard the basic rights and dignity of employees, auditing foreign subsidiaries and subcontractors on a regular basis to make sure that those standards are met, and taking corrective action if they are not as good, or if they are not, is a good way to guard against ethical abuses. Human rights is another ethical issue in international business. Developed countries take for granted basic human rights such as the freedom of association, the freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and the freedom of movement. What the firm's responsibility is to make sure that the basic human rights are respected. The next ethical issue is environmental pollution. Ethical issues arise when environmental regulations in host nations are inferior to those in the home nation. Many developed nations have substantial regulations governing the emissions of pollutants, the dumping of toxic chemicals, the use of toxic materials in a workplace, and so on. Those regulations are often lacking in developing nations, and according to critics, the result can be higher levels of pollution from the operations of multinationals that would be allowed at home. Another environmental issue, or another ethical issue, is corruption. The United States signed the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act that outlawed the practice of paying bribes to foreign government officials in order to gain business. And the real ethical issue is if it is permissible for multinationals to pay government officials facilitating payments, if doing so creates local income and jobs. The last ethical issue is moral obligations. The concept of social responsibility refers to the idea that business people should consider the social consequences of economic actions when making business decisions, and that there should be a presumption in favor of decisions that have both good and economic social consequences. The roots of unethical behavior stem from 6 different topics. The first one being personal ethics, the second being the decision-making processes, the third being organizational culture, unrealistic performance expectations, leadership, and societal culture. To make sure that ethical issues are considered in international business decisions, managers should A. favor hiring and promoting people with a well-grounded sense of personal ethics. B. Build an organizational culture that places a high value on ethical behavior. C. Make sure that leaders within the business are not only articulate the rhetoric of ethical behavior, but also act in a manner that is consistent with that rhetoric. D. Put business decision-making processes in place that require people to consider the ethical dimension of business decisions. And E. Be morally courageous and encourage others to do the same.